Let's go back to that top story then. GB Energy will allow Scotland to lead the clean energy revolution, Keir Starmer will say this morning, before the legislation to create the new company is introduced to Parliament. Well, let's hear now from the SNP MP, Dave Dugan. Hi, Dave.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm very good. You must be pleased and welcome this announcement wholeheartedly.
Well, Scotland already leads the UK on clean renewable energy. In fact, we lead most of Europe, in fact, all of Europe. We've got a bounty of topography and geography that allows us to do that. We've got a government in Edinburgh who knows how to enable it. So that's why we are streets ahead of the rest of the United Kingdom. So GB Energy won't change that, and it certainly won't create it.
But presumably you welcome the commitment from the UK government to do more to deliver greener energy.
Well, of course, because that's an abstract top-level ambition. What is less enthusiastically welcomed is the fact that in the course of a couple of months in the campaign, they reduced the budget for GB Energy from 28 billion to 8.3 billion. And actually, what's revealed in that move is that GB Energy is little more than some gift wrapping around an already existing element of the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. The Labour campaign during this general election promised people up and down these islands a state-owned energy company, the likes of Vattenfall in Sweden or something of that nature, where at the very least profits would go back into the public purse and energy bills might be a little bit lower. This is nothing of the sort. It's smoke and mirrors. It's the worst possible kind of snake oil salesperson technique. There is nothing about GB Energy which you should get excited about. It's simply the existing functions of the Department of Energy and Security and Net Zero in a gift wrap. It's been branded. That's all it is.
Would the SNP promise a state-owned energy company which would bring down people's bills?
Yes, and I'm glad you raised that, because the reason that couldn't happen is because of the chronic system that has been created by Ofgem, which is the worst of all the quangos. If you want to have a community energy company, and if you wanted to start one as the Scottish Government did, which is perfectly noble and cogent ambition, the way that you have to negotiate the regulation created by Ofgem makes it almost impossible. Or insofar as it is possible, you'll find no competitive advantage or value for money advantage for consumers, rendering it completely pointless. That is a function of the UK electricity market, not a lack of ambition from the SNP Scottish Government.
Where do you stand on the question of oil and gas? Because on the one hand, the SNP, it prides itself, progressive party on the left, very green. You want more green investment, but then most of your plans for independence rest on you continuing to exploit oil and gas, don't they? And raising the tax funds from that. There's a conflict there, isn't there, in the SNP's approach to these issues?
Well, there would be if what you said was right, but the plans or the economic bedrock for independence does not rest on oil and gas. Even oil in its heyday, we knew it was a finite resource that would be exceeded by other substantial elements of the Scottish economy, which are manifold and substantial and growing. That's why Scotland is the second most productive part of the United Kingdom outside London and the South East. But so our position on oil and gas is one of a just transition, where we know that this finite resource is going to draw down, but we don't slam the door on the workers the way that Labour have by insisting that no more licences will be granted for the North Sea when they do nothing to abate the demand for oil. We all still go to the petrol station every day. We all switch on our boilers in the winter time. And energy has to come from somewhere. I'd like to see it coming from workers in the North Sea, from oil and gas, from our own zone. So rather than importing it from goodness knows where, from what type of regime, we know not. So yet another cack-handed Labour manoeuvre which will shut down a perfectly productive and lucrative element of the Scottish economy. We're used to that under Labour. We saw it in the 70s.
Dave, there is clearly a contradiction there. On the one hand, you're trying to position yourselves as being more green than Labour, and why aren't they doing more on green energy, while also trying to not upset the thousands of people who are employed in the oil and gas industry? That's ultimately what it's about, isn't it?
No, not at all. This is about a transition. It's not about shutting one door and opening another. I can't power my car's diesel. I can't power it with electricity. And many other people are in the same situation. The operative word in net zero is net, not zero. Oil and gas will continue to be a function of our energy market for many years.
Therefore, is your criticism that they're being too green or not green enough?
They're not. It's not green at all, because they were putting 100,000 workers out of work in the North Sea sector, which is what Labour are now doing. That won't help the climate one bit, because the energy will come from somewhere. And the diesel that you put in your car and I put in my car will just come from further away than it does already. That's going to have a higher carbon footprint for the same energy output. Labour are completely incoherent on this.
Well, thank you for that, Dave. Dave Dugan there, the SNP MP, reacted to that GB Energy news. And I think Keir Starmer's going to speak a bit later on this morning. So